Today I'm going to be talking about the famous poet Pablo Neruda and compare his works and life to humanities aspects. Pablo Neruda was a poet diplomat in Chile. He is one of the most well-known Spanish poets of the 20th century. Language was not a huge barrier for Pablo Neruda since hundreds of his poems have been successfully translated into English, but his communist ideals is one barrier Americans have trouble surpassing. Around the same time that Neruda was entering politics and diplomacy in Chile, the Golpe de Estado happened, which essentially was a military uprising and an establishment of a dictatorship, causing all the politicians to flee for their lives away from Chile. What I will be trying to prove in this presentation is that Pablo Neruda has impacted the world with his poetry and political advocacy. He has changed the way of thinking in not only Chile, but also in all Latin America who were going through similar circumstances. As said before, Neruda was very well known during the 20th century, especially in his native country of Chile. Here, he started his writing career when he was merely a young adult and would submit his works anonymously into the city columns because he knew his family would disapprove of his writing career. His beginning literature was focused on love. He came out with the book Cien Sonetos de Amor, which translates to 100 love sonnets. He was very well known, so much that his works were successfully published in English and became recognized in far more countries besides those of South America. Love poems were the beginning of his career, but soon after began to write poems about current events and social problems in his community. This right here was one of Neruda's beginning love poems. After reading this piece, one may see that Pablo Neruda in his beginning of his career was very mushy-gushy. However, as I mentioned before, his political philosophical poems come later on and catch much more attention. Neruda believed in the philosophy of existentialism, and he expressed it frequently throughout a period of his poems, especially to foreshadow the post-World War II ways of life and philosophies. This was a philosophical approach that emphasized the individual free will of a person. One poem that describes this philosophy would be his infamous poem, Residencia en la Tierra, which translates to a residence of the earth. Because of this poem and its controversies, he came to believe that the work of art and the statement of thought, when these are responsible human actions rooting in human need, are inseparable from historical and political context. Now on to politics. Neruda was very public on his communist ideals, and is one of the reasons why he was being sought after during the Golpe de Estado, and why he's so disliked in American culture. Neruda ended up hiding from Videla and Pinochet, and his armies drew towards his constant letters supporting strikings, protests, and many more acts of political activism against the dictatorship. For the most part, Neruda expresses his political thought and viewpoint in his poem Canto General, which describes a man's obstacles faced to achieve justice in the New World. One poem from the Canto General is The Heights of Machu Picchu. This poem is an epic that holds up to 12 sections in it. He gives insight after years of traveling that we are all somewhat insignificant in this world, especially if we did not do anything of significance. He does this by reflecting on the lost Inca city for what the title is named after. As depicted in Neruda's poems, he makes it clear that he is an atheist. An atheist is one who does not believe in the existence of God. He makes it clear that in times of need, it is up to man to rely on man, and not a God. He is also not fond of religious leaders, and does not believe that they are fit to lead a nation solely based on religion. Some poems that are translated into English that express Neruda's religious opinions are Religion in the East, as seen above. Now, to talk about Neruda's impact and why he was so important. Neruda often made political declarations and statements if he was in a disaccord with something, which made him stand out even more and gain even more influence. In his native country of Chile, he was often seen and heard defending his own political interests, similar to Salvador Allende, who was a Marxist, against the dictator of Chile at the time. Although there were many advocates during Neruda's time, Neruda was substantially the loudest and most well-known, even in nations of not his own. An example of his affairs in different nations would be his input in Mexico and how he made a public declaration against the military regime set there. Now, to mention Neruda's associates. Neruda was also very good friends with not only great political figures, but also great artists like Pablo Picasso and Diego Rivera, and some even say that he was on the same artistic level as these praised artists. Neruda has had a great impact on the world overall, can be objectively proven by the amounts of awards and accomplishments. He has been awarded with all these prizes and accomplishments listed above. With Neruda's philosophies and literature, he inspired Latin American countries, especially Chile, with the revolution and fleeing that was going on at the time. Other Latin American countries that went through similar circumstances as Chile would be Venezuela and Mexico. Due to the fact that he would write things people were afraid to write because it went against the dictatorship and was happening at the time, people named him the voice of the people or the poet of the people. As you can see, Pablo Neruda lit a fire in people and inspired them to stand up to the governments who oppressed them, which is why he was so much more than just a poet, but is seen as a revolutionary.